The morning sun poured through the blinds of Sofia Martinez's small apartment as her alarm blared for the third time. She groaned, reaching out to silence it before forcing herself to sit up. Another day, another double shift. Her tired eyes glanced at the calendar on her wall, where she'd circled next month's tuition deadline for her sister's college in bright red marker. Just 6 more weeks of extra shifts, she whispered to herself, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Sofia's apartment was modest but tidy. The kitchenette flowed into a living area where a weathered couch faced a small TV she rarely had time to watch. In the corner sat her most prized possession, a used 88-key digital piano she'd found at a pawn shop 3 years ago. It wasn't the Steinway Grand she'd played during her conservatory days, but it kept her fingers nimble and her heart full. She showered quickly, tied her dark hair into a neat bun, and put on the crisp white shirt and black pants that made up her uniform at the Glass House, one of the city's most upscale restaurants. As she applied a touch of mascara, she caught herself humming Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece she'd been practicing late into the night. "Not today, Sophia," she told her reflection. "Today you're just a waitress who needs to make rent." The bus ride downtown was crowded as usual. Sophia squeezed into a seat near the back, pulled out her phone, and opened her banking app. The numbers hadn't magically improved overnight. Between her rent, her sister's tuition installments, and the medical bills still lingering from her father's final illness, her savings were paper-thin. 3 years ago, life had looked completely different. Sophia had been in her 3rd year at Westlake Conservatory of Music, one of only 6 pianists selected from hundreds of applicants. Her professors had called her playing transcendent and deeply moving. She had been preparing for a prestigious competition that could have launched her career when the call came that her father had collapsed at work. The diagnosis was swift and cruel: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Her mother, who spoke limited English, couldn't navigate the healthcare system alone while working full-time. Sophia's younger sister, Lucia, was still in high school. There was no choice to make. Family came first. She withdrew from school, moved home, and took the first job she could find. Now at 25, she'd settled into a routine that most days allowed her to forget what might have been. Her co-workers at the Glass House knew her as dependable, quick with a smile, and someone who never complained about taking extra shifts. What they didn't know was that she'd once performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with a university orchestra, receiving a standing ovation that still echoed in her dreams. The bus lurched to a stop 2 blocks from the restaurant. Sophia checked her watch, 30 minutes early as usual. She walked briskly, enjoying the fresh morning air before she'd spend the next 12 hours indoors. "Morning, sunshine," called Rico, the dishwasher, as she entered through the back door of the restaurant. He was always the first to arrive, getting the kitchen sparkling before the chefs descended with their controlled chaos. "Morning, Rico. How's your son doing with those piano lessons I told you about?" Sophia asked as she stowed her bag in her locker. Rico beamed with pride. "Teacher says he's got natural talent. Been practicing every day without me having to nag him. That doesn't happen with his math homework, I can tell you that." Sophia smiled, genuinely pleased. She'd helped Rico find an affordable piano teacher for his 10-year-old. After overhearing the boy talking about music during a staff family day, she'd carefully avoided mentioning her own background, simply saying she knew a little about music. "That's wonderful. Consistency is the key with music. It's like building a house. You need to lay each brick perfectly." As other staff began to arrive, the Glass House transformed from a quiet space to a hive of activity. Sophia tied her apron, checked her section assignments, and began her opening duties, polishing already gleaming silverware, folding napkins into perfect triangles, and memorizing the day's specials. "Martinez, you're on sections 3 and 4 today," said Vernon, the floor manager, barely looking up from his clipboard. "We've got the governor's economic advisor at table 12 for lunch, so mind your P's and Q's." "Got it?" Sophia nodded, secretly relieved. Sections 3 and 4 were the restaurant's power lunch zone, business people who tipped well but didn't linger for hours. Perfect for maximizing her earnings today. The lunch service began promptly at 11:30. Sophia moved efficiently between her tables, taking orders, delivering exquisite plates of food, and anticipating needs before guests even realized they had them. Her years of musical training had given her an almost supernatural ability to remember details. Who had asked for no onions? Who preferred still water instead of sparkling? Which businessman needed his check immediately after dessert to make a 1:30 meeting? How do you do that? Asked Zoe, a newer server, during a rare quiet moment as they refilled bread baskets in the service station. Do what? Sophia asked, arranging sourdough rolls. Remember everything without writing it down? I saw you take that 8-top's entire order without a notepad. I would have mixed up everything. Sophia shrugged. I don't know. I just hear patterns, I guess. It's like each table has its own rhythm. What she didn't say was that memorizing complex musical scores had trained her brain to hold vast amounts of information. A table's dinner order was nothing compared to the thousands of notes in a Beethoven sonata. The lunch rush faded around 2:30, leaving Sophia with a brief window to eat something before dinner preparations began. She sat in the staff area, quickly eating a plate of pasta the kitchen had prepared for the employees, when her phone buzzed with a text. It was from her sister Lucia. Got an A on my biology midterm. Those flashcards you helped me make worked. Sophia's exhaustion lifted slightly. This was why she did it all. Why she worked the double shifts, why she lived in the tiny apartment, why she had set aside her own dreams. Lucia would have the chances she didn't get. That's amazing. So proud of you. She texted back. She was about to put her phone away when she saw another notification. An email from her former piano professor, Dr. Chen. Her heart skipped a beat. They hadn't spoken in almost a year. Dear Sophia, it read, I hope this finds you well. I'm writing because the Westlake Young Artist Competition has modified its age limit to 26 this year. Applications are due next month. I've never forgotten your interpretation of the Chopin ballads. The music world should hear you play. Please consider it. Your talent was too extraordinary to remain silent. Sophia stared at the screen until it went dark. The competition. The one that could change everything. That offered not just prize money but a management contract and a recital tour. For a wild moment she allowed herself to imagine it, returning to music, stepping onto a stage again, feeling the cool keys beneath her fingers and the hushed anticipation of an audience. Then reality crashed back. When would she practice? How would she pay the application fee? And if by some miracle she advanced, how would she take time off for the competition rounds? She slipped her phone back into her pocket. Dreams were luxury items and she was on a strict budget of practicality these days. Martinez, we need you on the floor, Vernon called. The Carmichael party just got seated in your section and they're regulars. Big tippers if you treat them right. Coming, she called back, pushing away thoughts of Chopin and concert halls. The afternoon slipped into evening, and the restaurant's atmosphere changed. Lights dimmed, candles were lit on each table, and the casual business crowd gave way to couples celebrating anniversaries, wealthy families marking birthdays, and corporate executives entertaining clients. Sophia moved through it all with practiced grace, her feet aching but her smile never faltering. When she delivered a particularly expensive bottle of wine to a table, she recognized the opening notes of Liszt's Liebestraum, playing softly through the restaurant's sound system. For just a moment, her fingers twitched at her sides, muscle memory taking over as she mentally played along with the recording. She could feel the weight of each key, could hear how she would shape each phrase differently, adding more rubato in the middle section, letting the arpeggios shimmer like light on water. Miss? Can we get the check when you have a moment? The spell broke. Sophia nodded to the customer. Right away, sir. As her shift neared its end, Vernon gathered the staff for a quick meeting. I need 3 servers for a special event this Saturday, he announced. The Henderson Foundation is hosting their annual charity gala here and we're catering. It's a flat rate plus tips and it'll run late. Sophia's hand shot up before he finished speaking. Extra money was extra money no matter how tired she'd be. Vernon nodded. Martinez, Chen, and Alvarez. Be here at 3 on Saturday for briefing. As the staff dispersed, Sophia checked her phone again, Dr. Chen's email still open. The application deadline for the competition was 4 weeks away, the same week as her sister's tuition payment. She walked to the bus stop under a sky scattered with stars, her mind calculating hours and dollars. If she took every extra shift, if she cut back on groceries, if she walked instead of taking the bus when weather permitted, maybe there would be enough for both. At home, exhausted, she should have gone straight to bed. Instead, she sat at her digital piano, put on headphones so as not to disturb her neighbors, and began to play. Her tired fingers stumbled at first, but then muscle memory took over. The Chopin Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the piece she would play if she entered the competition, flowed from her hands as if the 3 years away had never happened. As the final notes faded, Sophia realized she was crying. Not from sadness, but from something more complex. The recognition of a part of herself that refused to disappear, no matter how deeply she buried it beneath practical concerns. She wiped her eyes, closed the piano lid, and set her alarm for another early morning. Tomorrow would be another day of carrying plates and remembering orders. But tonight, for 42 minutes, she had been a pianist again, and somewhere deep inside, a tiny, impractical hope had begun to flicker. Saturday arrived with a sky full of heavy clouds threatening rain. Sophia checked the weather app on her phone as she hurried to catch an earlier bus. The last thing she needed was to arrive at the Henderson Foundation Gala with rain-soaked shoes and frizzy hair. The past few days had been a blur of regular shifts and late nights. After receiving Dr. Chen's email about the piano competition, Sophia had found herself drawn to her keyboard every night, no matter how exhausted she felt. Her fingers were remembering, growing stronger, more precise. The muscle memory was still there, buried beneath years of carrying trays and pouring wine. She'd even dug out her old metronome, setting it to a painfully slow tempo to work through the trickiest passages of the Chopin Ballade. She knew she was being foolish. The application deadline was approaching, and she still hadn't figured out how to pay both the entry fee and Lucia's tuition. Yet something wouldn't let her give up this time. "You're early," Vernon commented as Sophia entered the restaurant 3 hours before the gala was set to begin. He was dressed in a sharper suit than usual, his normally casual demeanor replaced with a tense focus that told Sophia just how important tonight's event was for the Glass House. "Wanted to beat the rain," she explained, hanging up her light jacket in the staff area. "Good thinking. Now this event is different from our usual service," Vernon said, gathering the 3 servers he'd selected as the rest of the catering staff bustled around them. "The Henderson Foundation pays top dollar, and their guests are serious players. CEOs, philanthropists, a few minor celebrities. Many of them are regular diners here, so they know our standards." Zoe and Miguel, the other 2 servers selected for the event, nodded attentively. Sophia listened while mentally calculating how many hours this event would add to her paycheck. "You'll be in formal uniform tonight," Vernon continued, gesturing to garment bags hanging nearby. "Black tie service, synchronized serving. We rehearse in 30 minutes. The staff area transformed into a makeshift dressing room as servers and kitchen staff prepared for the evening. Sophia slipped into the formal black dress provided for female servers, a simple, elegant design with the Glass House's discreet logo embroidered on the shoulder. It fit better than she expected, though she had to roll the hem once to keep it from dragging. "You look nice with your hair down," Zoe commented as Sophia removed her practical bun and let her dark waves fall to her shoulders. "I've never seen you wear it like that at work." "Thanks," Sophia smiled. "It's not practical for regular shifts, but Vernon insisted we look polished tonight." As they joined the rest of the team for Vernon's service rehearsal, Sophia noticed a woman she didn't recognize speaking urgently with the restaurant owner near the grand piano that normally sat unused in the corner of the main dining room. The piano had been moved to a more prominent position, with special lighting arranged above it. "Who's that talking to Mr. Hargrove?" she whispered to Rico, who was setting up a dessert station nearby. "Some big shot from the foundation," Rico whispered back. "Been here since morning, making sure everything's perfect." "You should have heard her on the phone earlier. Sounded like someone let her down big time." Before Sophia could ask more, Vernon clapped his hands for attention, and the staff formed a line for his inspection and final instructions. For the next hour, they rehearsed the choreographed service that would impress the gala attendees. How to approach tables simultaneously, the proper way to present and pour the expensive wines selected for each course, the exact timing between courses. Sophia was assigned to the VIP table, where the foundation's board members and special guests would be seated. As Vernon went through the names and dietary restrictions, she committed them to memory just as she had done with musical scores years ago. Mrs. Winters, no shellfish. Mr. Takahashi, vegetarian option. Dr. and Mrs. Goldstein, kosher meal. At 5 o'clock, with an hour remaining before guests would arrive, Vernon gathered them for final touch-ups and assignments. That's when Sophia overheard the conversation that would change everything. "What do you mean he's in the hospital?" Mr. Hargrove was saying to the foundation woman, his voice tight with stress. "The program has already been printed. There's a special introduction for him." "It was his appendix," the woman explained, her perfectly manicured hands twisting anxiously. "They took him into surgery 2 hours ago. There's absolutely no way he can perform tonight. Can't you find another pianist? Surely in this city, on 3 hours' notice, for a charity gala with the governor attending?" The woman shook her head. "I've made 20 calls. Everyone's booked or out of town. We're going to have to cancel the musical portion." Sophia froze, her heart suddenly racing. The musical portion. A pianist. She glanced at the gleaming black grand piano, now positioned under perfect lighting, waiting for hands that wouldn't come. "That's a disaster," Mr. Hargrove was saying. "The music is a highlight of your annual event. People expect it. Don't you think I know that? The foundation chair is going to have my head." The woman looked close to tears despite her polished exterior. "We have to rearrange the entire program now, extend the speeches, maybe the auction." Sophia took a deep breath and stepped forward before she could talk herself out of it. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Both Mr. Hargrove and the foundation woman turned to look at her with identical expressions of annoyance at the interruption. "What is it?" Mr. Hargrove asked sharply. "We're in the middle of a crisis, Martinez." "I know. I couldn't help overhearing." Sophia squared her shoulders. "I play piano. I studied at Westlake Conservatory for 3 years. The woman's expression changed from irritation to desperate hope so quickly it would have been comical in any other situation. "You're a pianist? A trained classical pianist?" "Yes," Sophia said simply, though her hands were trembling slightly at her sides. Mr. Hargrove looked at her in shock. "You've worked here for 2 years and never mentioned this?" "It never came up," Sophia replied. It wasn't entirely true. She had deliberately avoided mentioning her musical background, finding it easier to separate her two lives completely. The foundation woman stepped closer. "What's your repertoire? What can you perform tonight? We need 20 to 30 minutes of music." Sophia's mind raced through the pieces she knew well enough to perform with minimal preparation. Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, Debussy's Clair de Lune, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the first movement of Mozart's Sonata in C major. The woman's eyes widened slightly. These weren't simple pieces. They were challenging works that required significant technical skill and artistic interpretation. "You know these by heart?" "Right now?" Mr. Hargrove asked, clearly skeptical. "Yes," Sophia said, more confidently than she felt. It had been years since she'd performed in public and never on such short notice. But the pieces she'd mentioned were the ones she'd continued to play even after leaving the conservatory. The ones she knew in her bones. "Let's hear something," the woman said, gesturing to the piano. "Right now." Sophia glanced at Vernon, who was watching the exchange with confusion. He gave her a slight nod and she moved toward the piano, aware that the entire staff had stopped working to watch. The moment she sat at the bench, adjusting it to her height, she felt a familiar calm settle over her. This was different from her small digital keyboard at home. This was a professional instrument, perfectly tuned with a touch that responded to the slightest pressure. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness, and began to play the opening notes of Clair de Lune. The gentle, impressionistic melody filled the restaurant. Sophia closed her eyes briefly, letting her fingers find their way through the familiar terrain of the piece. The world around her, the staring staff, the skeptical owner, the desperate foundation woman, all faded away. There was only the music, rising and falling like the tide, building to the climax before returning to the gentle theme. When she finished, the restaurant was completely silent. She turned to find the foundation woman staring at her with an expression of disbelief and relief. That was... The woman seemed at a loss for words. "Beautiful," Mr. Hargrove finished, looking at Sophia as if seeing her for the first time. "Why are you waiting tables, Martinez?" The question stung, but Sophia kept her expression neutral. "Life happens," she said simply. The foundation woman stepped forward. "I'm Diane Keller, event director for the Henderson Foundation. Would you be willing to perform tonight? We can pay you the same fee we were going to pay our original pianist." Sophia blinked at the amount Diane named. It was more than she made in 2 weeks at the restaurant. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'd be honored. But we still need her for service, Vernon interjected, looking torn between pride in his employee and concern about being short-staffed. I can do both, Sophia offered quickly, not wanting to lose either opportunity. I'll perform and then change back for dinner service. Mr. Hargrove shook his head. No, this changes things. Martinez, you're officially reassigned for the evening. You're our pianist now, not a server. Diane was already on her phone, typing rapidly. I need to update the program. What's your full name? Sophia Martinez. Any formal bio I can include? Previous performances, awards? Sophia hesitated. I was a scholarship student at Westlake Conservatory for 3 years. Performed with their orchestra as a featured soloist twice. It felt strange to speak of her musical background so openly, after keeping it separate from her work life for so long. Part of her worried that after tonight things would change, that her colleagues would see her differently, that she wouldn't fit neatly into either world anymore. That works. I'll keep it simple, Diane said, still typing. The performance is scheduled for after the welcome speech but before dinner. You'll have about 30 minutes. Can you put together a program of 4 or 5 pieces? Yes, Sophia nodded, mentally selecting which pieces would work best together, which were most secure in her memory. You'll need something to wear, Diane added, eyeing Sophia's server uniform critically. I have a dress, Zoe interrupted, stepping forward. She'd been listening to the entire exchange with growing excitement. My sister's getting married next month, and I just picked up my bridesmaid's dress yesterday. It's in my car. It might fit you. That would be wonderful, Diane said before Sophia could respond. Let's see it right away. And we'll need to do something with her hair and makeup. The next hour passed in a blur. Zoe's bridesmaid dress, a simple but elegant black gown, fit Sophia well enough with a few safety pins for adjustments. One of the hostesses, who did makeup work on the side, offered to help with Sophia's appearance. Someone found dress shoes that were close to her size. Through it all, Sophia kept returning to the piano between fittings and preparations, running through difficult passages, reacquainting her fingers with the touch of a real grand piano. She was nervous but also strangely calm. This felt right in a way that nothing had for years. As guests began to arrive, Sophia was hidden away in the small office behind the kitchen, her server uniform replaced by Zoe's black dress, her hair arranged in an elegant updo, her face carefully made up to withstand the stage lighting. Through the office door, she could hear the growing buzz of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of wealthy, powerful people gathering for an evening of philanthropy and networking. People who would normally view her only as the person bringing their food were about to hear her play, really play, with all the skill and emotion she'd kept hidden for too long. Diane poked her head into the office. 5 minutes, Sophia. Are you ready? Sophia took a deep breath, thinking of her sister Lucia, of the competition application sitting unopened in her email, of the years spent setting aside her own dreams. She thought of Dr. Chen's words. Your talent was too extraordinary to remain silent. I'm ready, she said, standing up. And for the first time in years, she truly was. The main dining room of the glass house had been transformed for the Henderson Foundation Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in midnight blue linens. Centerpieces of white orchids and silver candelabras created an atmosphere of understated luxury. Near the front of the room, the grand piano waited under perfectly positioned spotlights, its lid raised to project the sound across the space. Sophia stood in the shadows at the edge of the room, her heart pounding. Through a small gap in the service door, she could see that every seat was filled. Women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos sipped champagne and chatted, unaware that their scheduled entertainment had changed. At the center table sat the governor and his wife, along with what Sophia recognized as the city's elite, people whose names appeared in newspaper headlines and on buildings around town. 2 minutes, whispered Diane, appearing beside her with a tablet displaying the evening's schedule. The foundation chairman is about to introduce you. Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. This wasn't like her student recitals or even the conservatory orchestra performances. Those had been in front of music lovers who understood the work that went into each piece. These people had come expecting a professional pianist with international credentials, not a waitress who practiced on a keyboard in a tiny apartment. From the kitchen doorway across the room, she spotted Rico giving her an enthusiastic thumbs up. Next to him, Zoe and Miguel were peering out, their faces a mix of excitement and disbelief. Even Vernon stood nearby, his usual stern expression replaced with something that might have been pride. A distinguished older man approached the microphone set up near the piano. The room gradually quieted as he tapped it twice. "Good evening, friends of the Henderson Foundation," he began. "I'm Lawrence Henderson, and it's my privilege to welcome you to our 20th annual charity gala." Polite applause followed as he continued. "With thanks to sponsors and a brief overview of the Foundation's work providing music education to underserved communities." The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. She had once been one of those scholarship kids whose life was changed by access to music. Now, before we enjoy the wonderful dinner prepared by the talented chefs here at the Glass House, we have a special musical interlude, Henderson continued. "Our scheduled pianist had an unfortunate medical emergency this afternoon." A murmur of disappointment rippled through the crowd. "However," Henderson said, his voice lifting, "we've been extraordinarily fortunate to discover a remarkable talent right here among the staff of the Glass House." This announcement caused more murmuring, this time of curiosity and surprise. Sophia saw several guests exchange skeptical glances. "Please welcome to the piano Ms. Sophia Martinez." The spotlight swung toward the side of the room where Sophia stood. For a split second, she froze, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look, a server in a borrowed dress about to perform for the city's most powerful people. Then she felt a gentle push from Diane and stepped forward into the light. The applause was polite but reserved as she crossed the floor. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, assessing, wondering. She heard someone at a nearby table whisper, "Isn't that our usual waitress?" followed by a hushing sound from their companion. As Sophia reached the piano, she took a deep breath and turned to face the room with a slight bow, just as she'd been taught years ago. The audience fell silent, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. She sat at the bench, adjusting its height, and took another steadying breath. Her hands were trembling slightly as she positioned them over the keys. For one terrifying moment, her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember the opening notes of the Chopin piece she'd planned to play first. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, shutting out the staring faces. She thought of her father, who had worked 2 jobs to buy her first piano lessons when she showed interest as a child. She thought of Lucia, who had always been her biggest fan, sitting through countless practice sessions with genuine admiration. She thought of Dr. Chen, who had seen something in her playing that went beyond technical skill. When she opened her eyes again, the room had disappeared. There was only the piano, her hands, and the music waiting to be brought to life. She began with the Chopin Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a bold choice to open with such a challenging piece, but it was the work she knew best, the one that lived in her fingers and her heart. The gentle questioning notes of the introduction filled the room, so soft that the audience leaned forward slightly to hear. Then came the main theme, wistful and yearning. Sophia let the melody breathe, giving it room to tell its story. As the piece progressed to its more technical sections, her fingers flew across the keys with a precision that surprised even her. The muscle memory was there, stronger than she'd dared to hope. When the piece reached its thunderous climax, she abandoned herself to it completely, no longer thinking about technique or tempo or the watching crowd. She was simply a vessel for the music, channeling the joy and pain and hope that Chopin had written into the notes 2 centuries ago. The final chords resonated through the room, hanging in the air for a long moment of absolute silence. Then came the applause, tentative at first, then growing stronger as the audience realized what they had just witnessed. Sophia remained still at the piano, slightly stunned by what had just happened. She had connected with the music in a way she hadn't experienced since before leaving the conservatory. Without pausing long enough to become self-conscious again, she moved into her second piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. Where the Chopin had been passionate and dramatic, this was delicate and shimmering like moonlight on water. The impressionistic harmonies created a dreamlike atmosphere in the room. Sophia saw several people close their eyes, transported by the music. By the time she began her third piece, the rhythmic, sunlit Mozart sonata in C major, the tension had left her body entirely. She was playing with joy now, remembering why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. The Mozart had always made her happy, its bright clarity like a perfect summer day. As she played the final notes of the Mozart, she heard the unmistakable sound of a chair being pushed back. She looked up to see an older man with silver hair rising to his feet, applauding. Others followed, first at his table, then spreading throughout the room until the entire audience was standing. A standing ovation. For her, Sophia. She stood a bit unsteady on her borrowed heels and bowed deeply. The applause continued, showing no signs of stopping. She saw Diane at the side of the room making a subtle go-on gesture with her hands. Returning to the piano, Sophia decided to conclude with something unexpected. Rather than the Beethoven she'd planned, she began to play a piece she'd composed herself during her darkest days after leaving school. It was a simple melody that evolved into something complex and ultimately triumphant, the story of her life translated into music. The audience listened in rapt silence to this unfamiliar work. When it ended, the applause was even more enthusiastic than before. She stood again, bowing once more, overwhelmed by the response. As she made her way from the piano, she noticed something unusual. Several people were holding up their phones, recording her performance or taking photos. One woman was urgently typing on her phone, glancing up at Sophia with an expression of amazed discovery. Lawrence Henderson approached her before she could leave the spotlight. "Ms. Martinez, that was extraordinary," he said, taking her hand. "Would you join us at the main table? I believe many of our guests would like to speak with you." Sophia glanced toward the kitchen where Vernon stood watching. He nodded his approval and she allowed herself to be led to the VIP table. The governor's wife moved aside to make room for her, smiling warmly. "That was absolutely beautiful," the woman said as Sophia sat down. "Lawrence tells me you work here at the restaurant?" "Yes, for about 2 years now," Sophia replied, still slightly dazed by the turn of events. "And where did you study?" "Your technique is remarkable. Westlake Conservatory, but I had to leave during my 3rd year." A man across the table leaned forward. "I'm on the board at Westlake." "Why did you leave?" "Talent like yours doesn't come along often." The question was asked kindly, but Sophia felt her cheeks warm. "Family circumstances. My father became ill, and I needed to help support my mother and sister." Understanding nods around the table. The governor's wife patted her hand. "Life gets in the way of our plans sometimes, doesn't it? But clearly your gift remained intact." As the first course was served by Zoe, who couldn't stop smiling at Sophia, the conversation continued. The people at the table seemed genuinely interested in her story, asking thoughtful questions about her music and her background. There was none of the condescension she had feared, no sense that they viewed her as just a server who got lucky. "You mentioned you composed the last piece yourself," said a woman who had introduced herself as the director of the city's arts council. "Do you have other original works?" "A few," Sophia admitted. "Nothing formally published. Just pieces I wrote for myself. I'd love to hear them sometime. We're always looking for new voices for our contemporary music series." Before Sophia could respond, Diane appeared at her shoulder. "I hate to interrupt, but Ms. Martinez is getting quite a bit of attention online already." She held out her phone, showing a social media page where a video of Sophia's performance was already gathering comments and shares. "That was fast," Sophia said, surprised. "The power of the internet," the Arts Council director said with a smile. "By morning, I suspect quite a few people will be asking about you." As the evening continued, Sophia found herself shifting between two worlds, sometimes joining the conversation at the VIP table as an artist among peers, other times catching the eyes of her co-workers as they served the meal she was now eating as a guest. Rico gave her a wink as he presented the dessert course. Zoe couldn't stop beaming proudly whenever she approached the table. By the time the charity auction began after dinner, Sophia's phone was buzzing constantly in the small clutch purse Diane had lent her. Messages from Lucia, who had somehow already seen a clip of the performance online. Text from former classmates at the conservatory. And most surprisingly, an email from Dr. Chen with the subject line, "I always knew you would find your way back." Sophia opened it discreetly under the table. "My dear Sophia," it read. "A former student sent me a video of your performance tonight. Your playing has matured beautifully, even without formal training these past years. The competition deadline is still 2 weeks away. I've spoken with the committee chair. They're willing to waive the application fee. Say yes." Sophia stared at the screen, her vision blurring slightly with tears she refused to let fall in this room full of important people. After years of putting everyone else first, of telling herself that dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford, a door had suddenly opened. And this time, she was going to walk through it. Sophia woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through her blinds and the persistent buzz of her phone on the nightstand. For a moment she lay still, wondering if the previous night had been an elaborate dream, the kind that feels so real you're disoriented when you wake up. But the unfamiliar black gown hanging on her closet door confirmed it had all actually happened. She reached for her phone and was immediately overwhelmed. 67 text messages, over 100 email notifications, 23 missed calls, and social media, apps she barely used, showing countless alerts. What in the world? She murmured, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. The first message was from Lucia. OMG, sis, you're famous. Call me when you wake up. Famous? Sophia frowned and opened her social media app. Her stomach dropped. A video titled Waitress Stuns Luxury Gala with World-Class Piano Performance had over 300,000 views already. Posted just 9 hours ago. With shaking hands, she pressed play. Someone had recorded her entire performance of the Chopin Ballade from a table near the piano. The angle captured both her face, intense with concentration, and her hands flying across the keys. The video description read, "Our server at a charity gala stepped in when the scheduled pianist canceled. Watch the moment the crowd realizes they're witnessing something extraordinary." The comment section was filled with astonishment and praise. "I'm a classical pianist and this is genuinely brilliant playing. Her technique is conservatory level. Why is she waiting tables?" The way the entire room goes silent halfway through. Goosebumps. Someone get this woman a recording contract now. Sophia set the phone down, her heart racing. This wasn't the plan. She'd agreed to fill in for one night to earn some extra money. She hadn't expected anyone outside that room to ever know about it. Her phone rang. Lucia again. Sophia took a deep breath and answered. "You didn't tell me you were performing last night," Lucia exclaimed without saying hello. "I found out from my roommate who saw you on her feed. The whole school is talking about my sister, the viral piano sensation." "I didn't know," Sophia said weakly. "It was a last-minute thing. Their pianist got sick and I was there and it just happened. Well, it's amazing. I've watched it like 20 times. Have you seen how many views you're getting? And people are sharing it everywhere. Even Professor Williams showed it in my music appreciation class this morning." "Wait, what? How did your professor get it so quickly?" "Are you kidding?" "It's all over the classical music groups online. Someone posted it saying it was the best Chopin they'd heard in years and then it just exploded." Sophia's other line beeped. "Lucia, can I call you back? Someone else is calling." "It's probably a record label," Lucia joked. "Don't forget your little sister when you're famous." Sophia switched calls without responding to that comment. "Hello? Ms. Martinez? This is Catherine Lin from the Westlake Conservatory admissions office. Dr. Chen asked me to contact you regarding your reapplication." "Oh," Sophia said, caught off guard. "Yes, I was going to respond to his email today." "Wonderful. Dr. Chen has spoken with the dean, and given the circumstances of your original departure and your obvious continued development, they're prepared to offer you advanced standing if you wish to complete your degree. Dr. Chen would like to resume as your primary instructor." Sophia sank back against her pillows. "That's very generous. But there are financial considerations. The dean has authorized a full scholarship with a stipend for living expenses," Ms. Lin interrupted smoothly. "Your video from last night has made quite an impression on our faculty. We believe you represent exactly the kind of talent Westlake exists to nurture. A scholarship, a stipend, the chance to finish what she'd started, to study with Dr. Chen again. It seemed impossible. Can I think about it?" Sophia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Of course. But please don't take too long. The semester begins in 6 weeks and there are arrangements to be made." Ms. Lin paused. "And Ms. Martinez? Your playing is extraordinary. I hope you'll consider coming home to Westlake." After hanging up, Sophia sat motionless on her bed, trying to process everything. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications, but she ignored it, her mind racing through possibilities that had seemed completely out of reach just 24 hours ago. The sharp ring of her doorbell jolted her back to reality. She threw on a robe over her pajamas and went to answer it, half expecting to find a reporter or someone from the music world. Instead, it was Rico, Miguel, and Zoe, all still in their work uniforms. "You're famous," Zoe squealed, throwing her arms around Sophia. "And you're ignoring our texts, so we came in person." "Sorry, I just woke up and there are so many messages." "Never mind that," Rico said, holding up a bakery box. "We brought breakfast. And gossip. So much gossip from after you left last night." They crowded into her tiny apartment, chattering excitedly as they set up coffee and pastries on her small kitchen counter. It was strange seeing her work friends in her home, these two worlds colliding just like at the gala. "You should have seen Vernon after you left," Miguel said, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. "He kept telling everyone you were his discovery, like he'd personally nurtured your talent all these years." "Classic Vernon," Sophia laughed, relaxing a little with the familiar company. "But here's the real news," Zoe said, leaning forward. "Mr. Hargrove got 3 calls this morning from people at the gala, asking if you're available for private events. He's talking about creating an entertainment division of the Glass House with you as the star attraction." "What?" Sophia nearly spilled her coffee. "It's true," Rico nodded. "Double your current pay plus tips and performance fees. He told us to tell you to call him ASAP." Sophia's mind whirled with the possibilities. The Westlake offer, Mr. Hargrove's proposal, the hundreds of thousands of strangers who had watched her play. It was overwhelming. "I need to sit down," she murmured, though she was already sitting. "There's more," Miguel said, his expression growing serious. "A woman came into the restaurant this morning looking for you. Very elegant, expensive suit, the works. She left her card." He pulled it from his pocket and handed it to Sophia. The embossed card read, "Eleanor Townsend, Townsend Artists Management." "She represents concert pianists," Zoe explained, seeing Sophia's confusion. "I Googled her. She's big time. Her clients play with major orchestras, record with prestigious labels. She said she saw your video and wants to discuss representation." Sophia stared at the card. "A manager for concert pianists, wanting to talk to her. This can't be real," she whispered. "It is real," Rico said firmly, taking her hand. "This is what happens when extraordinary talent meets opportunity. And all of us knew you were special even before we heard you play." "You did?" "Of course," he nodded. "No one remembers complicated orders like you do. No one moves through a busy dining room with such perfect timing. You've always had music in you, Sophia. We could see it even if we didn't know what it was." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. She'd spent so long compartmentalizing her life, keeping her musical self separate from her working self, that she'd never considered how one might be influencing the other. "I don't know what to do next," she admitted. "Everything's happening so fast. What do you want to do?" Zoe asked gently. "Forget all these offers for a minute. What does your heart tell you?" Sophia closed her eyes and let herself feel the answer rather than think it. "I want to play," she said simply. "I've always wanted to play, even when I told myself I had to be practical. Even when I packed away that part of my life, I never stopped wanting it." Her friends nodded, understanding. "Then that's your answer," Miguel said. "The how will figure itself out." As if on cue, Sophia's phone rang again. She checked the screen. It was a local number she didn't recognize. "Hello? Ms. Martinez, this is Thomas Reed from the City Symphony. I'm calling because our artistic director attended the Henderson Foundation Gala last night and was quite taken with your performance." Sophia's breath caught. The City Symphony was the premier orchestra in the region, known for its world-class musicians and innovative programming. "I see," she managed to say. "We're in a bit of a bind. Our soloist for next weekend's concert has withdrawn due to a family emergency. The program includes Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1, which we heard you play beautifully last night." "I didn't play the concerto last night," Sophia corrected. Confused. "No, but our artistic director recognized your affinity for Chopin. He believes you could step in with adequate rehearsal time. It's short notice, but it would be a paid engagement, of course, and potentially the beginning of a continuing relationship with the symphony." Sophia's friends were watching her with wide eyes, clearly trying to guess what the call was about from her expression. "Mr. Reed, I'm honored, but the Chopin concerto is extremely demanding. And with only a week to prepare, we understand the challenge. But sometimes extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures. And from what we saw last night, you are quite extraordinary. Ms. Martinez," there was that word again. Extraordinary. For so long, Sophia had trained herself to be ordinary, to fit in, to not draw attention to her difference, to be reliable rather than remarkable. "Can I think about it?" she asked, echoing her response to Westlake. "Of course, but we'll need your decision by tomorrow. I'll email you the details." After hanging up, Sophia relayed the conversation to her friends, who responded with shrieks of excitement and a group hug that nearly knocked over her coffee table. "You have to do it," Zoe insisted. "It's the City Symphony." "But it's terrifying," Sophia countered. "I haven't played with an orchestra in years. I don't even own concert attire. And what about my shifts next week?" "We'll cover your shifts," Miguel said immediately. "All of us will split them." "And I have a friend in fashion design who can help with something to wear," Zoe added. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, Sophia." Rico, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "You know what my abuela always says? When God opens a door, you don't ask questions about the carpeting. All these opportunities coming at once, that's a sign." Sophia laughed, despite her anxiety. "I don't know if it's God or just social media algorithms, but it's definitely overwhelming." "In a good way, though, right?" Zoe pressed. Sophia thought about it. The fear was real, fear of failure, fear of change, fear of hoping for too much. But beneath that fear was something else. Joy, excitement, and a deep sense of rightness, as if she were finally returning to a path she should never have left. "Yes," she admitted. "In a good way." Her phone pinged with a text message. It was from Lucia. "Just saw your video hit 1 million views. P.S. I applied for campus jobs here at school. You don't need to help with my tuition anymore. It's your turn now. Love you, sis." Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. Her little sister releasing her from the responsibility that had shaped the last 3 years of her life, giving her permission to pursue her own dreams. She looked around at her friends, at her tiny apartment with the digital keyboard in the corner, at the pile of notifications still growing on her phone. In less than 24 hours, her carefully separated worlds had collided and merged into something new, something filled with possibilities she'd stopped allowing herself to imagine. "I think," she said slowly, "I need to start practicing the Chopin concerto." The decision, once made, felt right in a bone-deep way that told Sophia it was the correct choice. She wasn't naive enough to think everything would be easy from here. There would be challenges, adjustments, perhaps disappointments along the way. But for the first time in years, she was allowing herself to step fully into her gift, to embrace the extraordinary rather than hide it. She wasn't just Sophia the waitress or Sophia the pianist anymore. She was simply Sophia, finally whole. 1 year later, Sophia stood backstage at the Glass House, smoothing the fabric of her emerald green gown. The restaurant had been transformed once again for a special event, but this time she was the main attraction, not a last-minute replacement. Not a server moonlighting as a musician, but the featured artist for the evening. 5 minutes. "Ms. Martinez," said a young woman with a headset and clipboard, someone whose job it was to make sure Sophia had everything she needed before performing. The idea still seemed strange even a year later. "Thank you," Sophia replied with a smile. She could hear the murmur of the crowd through the curtain, the clink of glasses, the sophisticated hum of anticipation, a sold-out house. She peeked through a gap in the curtain, scanning the familiar space that looked so different from this perspective. The tables were arranged in a semicircle around the piano, which had been positioned on a small raised platform. Soft lighting created an intimate atmosphere, and fresh flowers adorned every surface. In the front row sat Lucia, home from college for the weekend, whispering excitedly to their mother, who wore a new dress for the occasion. Next to them was Dr. Chen, his familiar stern expression softened by the hint of pride in his eyes. Rico and his son were there too, the boy fidgeting in his suit with the restlessness of a 10-year-old dressed up for a grown-up event. Scattered throughout the room were faces that had become important to Sophia over the past year. Eleanor Townsend, now her manager, deep in conversation with a record label executive. The artistic director of the City Symphony, where Sophia had become a regular guest soloist. Lawrence Henderson, whose foundation had created a scholarship program based on Sophia's story, helping young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds. And of course, the staff of the Glass House, not in uniforms tonight but dressed as guests, with Vernon beaming as if he personally had composed the music Sophia would play. They had a special table reserved near the piano, a gesture from Mr. Hargrove, who had made good on his promise to create a regular music series at the restaurant with Sophia as its founding artist. "Ready?" asked a familiar voice behind her. Sophia turned to find Zoe, no longer in her server's uniform but dressed elegantly as tonight's event coordinator. After Sophia's success, she had proposed the idea of expanding her role at the Glass House to include event planning, starting with Sophia's concerts. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sophia replied, taking a deep breath. "Nervous? After all the concert halls you've played this year?" Zoe asked with a knowing smile. "Strangely, yes. This place, it's where everything changed." "It matters more somehow." Zoe squeezed her hand. "You're going to be amazing. Just like always." The past year had been a whirlwind that sometimes still felt like a dream. After her viral performance, Sophia had taken a leap of faith. She'd accepted the City Symphony's offer, practicing 16 hours a day for a week to prepare the Chopin concerto. The performance had been far from perfect. There had been moments when her lack of recent orchestra experience showed, but the raw emotion and authenticity of her playing had connected deeply with the audience. Reviews had called her a refreshing voice in classical music and an artist whose technical skills are matched by her emotional intelligence. The symphony had immediately invited her back for 3 more concerts. Simultaneously, she'd accepted Westlake's offer to complete her degree on scholarship, attending classes part-time while building her performance career. Dr. Chen had become not just her teacher again, but her mentor, helping her navigate the complex world of professional music. The Glass House had created a special position for her, artist in residence, allowing her to perform regularly in the space while giving her the flexibility to pursue other opportunities. It had been Mr. Hargrove's idea, a way to keep her connected to the place where her new life had begun while supporting her growing career. Most surprisingly of all, Sophia had found herself becoming an advocate and symbol of hope for other talented individuals sidetracked by life circumstances. The story of the waitress turned pianist had struck a chord with people around the world. She'd received thousands of messages from others who had set aside their passions for practical reasons, many inspired by her example to reconsider their paths. The Henderson Foundation had approached her about becoming the face of their music education initiative, using her story to raise funds for scholarships. It felt like coming full circle. She had once been a scholarship student herself, and now she was helping create opportunities for others. None of it had been easy. There had been brutal reviews alongside the glowing ones, technical struggles as she rebuilt her performance stamina, moments of imposter syndrome so severe she'd nearly canceled appearances. The classical music world could be coldly judgmental of newcomers, especially those with unconventional backgrounds. But through it all, Sophia had held on to the feeling she'd experienced that first night at the piano, the sense of rightness, of coming home to herself after a long absence. "It's time," Zoe said softly. Breaking into her thoughts, Sophia nodded, gathering herself. The house lights dimmed and a spotlight appeared on the small stage. Mr. Hargrove stepped into it, welcoming the audience to this special anniversary concert. "1 year ago tonight," he said, his voice warm with pride. "Many of you were in this room when we discovered that greatness sometimes hides in plain sight. A young woman who had served your meals with quiet grace revealed a gift so extraordinary that it changed not only her life but all of our lives in some way." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. In the year since, Sophia Martinez has performed with the City Symphony, recorded her first album, been re-invited to complete her conservatory degree, and helped establish a scholarship fund that has already supported 15 young musicians. He paused as applause broke out, but she has never forgotten where this new chapter began. Tonight she returns to the Glass House not as staff, but as the artist she was always meant to be. Please welcome Ms. Sophia Martinez. The applause swelled as Sophia stepped onto the stage, moving toward the piano with confidence that had grown over months of public performances. She no longer felt like an imposter in elegant clothes, but had come to understand that the gowns and formality were simply the costume that allowed audiences to focus on what mattered, the music itself. She settled at the piano bench, adjusting it slightly, then looked out at the audience, faces familiar and new, all watching with anticipation. In the front row, Lucia gave her a subtle thumbs up. Her mother wiped away a tear. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Sophia said into the microphone positioned near the piano. "This evening is special for many reasons, not least because it marks a full circle in my journey." She smiled at the staff table where Rico beamed back at her. "A year ago, I was afraid to let these two parts of my life touch. The practical woman who worked hard to support her family, and the artist who never stopped hearing music even when she couldn't fully express it." She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, not pressing down, just feeling their smooth coolness. "What I've learned since then is that we don't have to be just one thing. We contain multitudes, as the poet said. The discipline I learned as a server, the attention to detail, the ability to remember complex patterns, the grace under pressure, made me a better pianist. And the musician in me made me a better server, though I didn't recognize it at the time." Sophia paused, gathering her thoughts. "Tonight's program reflects that journey. I'll begin with the piece that started everything, Chopin's Ballade No. 1, followed by works that have shaped my path this year. But I'll end with something new, a composition of my own that tells this story in a way words never could." She took a deep breath, positioned her hands, and began to play. The familiar notes of the Chopin filled the room, but differently than they had a year before. Her interpretation had matured, informed by months of study and performance, by joy and struggle and growth. Where before there had been raw emotion and technical brilliance, now there was also nuance and intentionality. As she played, Sophia allowed herself to remember the journey, the little girl who first fell in love with piano, the student who thrived at the conservatory, the daughter who stepped away to care for her family, the waitress who kept her passion alive in the margins of a practical life, and finally, the artist who found a way to bring all these selves together. The program continued with pieces she'd performed throughout the year. The Mozart that had delighted her first symphony audience, the Debussy that had become her signature encore, a Bach prelude that Dr. Chen had insisted would rebuild her technical foundation. Each held memories now, markers of her evolution. When she finally turned to her original composition, a piece called Two Worlds, the audience leaned forward slightly, curious. It began simply, with a melody that evoked her early days at the glass house, steady, methodical, with hints of something deeper running beneath the surface. Gradually it evolved, incorporating fragments of classical works that had shaped her, building to a moment when the two themes, work and art, duty and passion, no longer fought for space but harmonized with each other. As she played the final notes, Sophia felt a profound sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't and never would be. There were still bills to pay, challenges to face, critics to win over. But she had found her way back to her truth, and in doing so had perhaps helped others remember their own. The applause when she finished was thunderous, the audience rising to their feet immediately. But the faces that meant the most to Sophia were those of her mother, dabbing at tears, Lucia clapping wildly with unabashed pride, Rico and his son, the boy watching with the same wonder Sophia had felt the first time she heard a professional pianist, and her former colleagues who had seen her potential even when she couldn't. After several bows and an encore, Sophia made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes. Eleanor was already talking about the next tour. Dr. Chen was critiquing specific passages, Old Habits Died Hard, and Mr. Hargrove was introducing her to influential music lovers who might support the scholarship fund. Eventually, she found herself back at the staff table, where Zoe pulled her into a tight hug. "Remember when you thought this was just going to be an extra shift for some quick cash?" Zoe teased. Sophia laughed. "Life has a funny way of taking unexpected turns. So what's next for the famous Sophia Martinez?" Miguel asked, raising his glass in a toast. "Carnegie Hall? World tour? Hollywood movie about your life?" "Actually," Sophia said, a smile playing at her lips, "I'm thinking of teaching." Their surprised expressions made her laugh again. Not instead of,